Walk through any big boat show and watch where the crowds go. They cluster around 60-foot performance catamarans with carbon masts and price tags past $1 million, and they walk straight past a completely different category of boats sitting quietly at the end of the dock. 32 to 38-foot cruising catamarans built 20 to 30 years ago, asking $60,000 to $150,000, with more usable living space than most monohulls twice their price. Nobody stops. Nobody asks. The brokers selling them will tell you the same thing every time. These are the boats that sit the longest on the dock and sell the fastest once someone actually steps aboard and does the math. And that is exactly the mistake everyone else keeps making, because these overlooked catamarans, not the flashy new ones, are quietly the cheapest way left to actually live on the water full time. Here's exactly why everyone walks past them, and here's exactly which ones are worth stopping for. The reason people walk past starts with a real number that scares them off before they ever step aboard: Marina slip fees. Because a catamaran's beam runs 60 to 70% of its overall length, a 37-foot cat can be nearly 22 feet wide enough to need a double-wide slip or a T-head instead of a standard finger pier. Marinas that charge by square footage instead of length routinely bill catamaran owners 20 to 50% more than a monohull of the same length, sometimes as much as double, and real numbers back that up. One marina in the US Virgin Islands charges $48 per foot specifically for multi-hulls, on top of Mediterranean marinas in Italy and Spain that are already documented charging 50 to 100% more in peak summer season than their off-season base rate, a general seasonal squeeze that hits wide-beam boats hardest since they have the fewest berths to compete for in the first place. That single fact is the reason so many sailors assume catamarans are expensive to own before they ever look at a purchase price. What that assumption misses is the second half of the equation. Catamarans are built to draw far less water than a monohull, some by more than half, which means they can anchor for free in skinny anchorages a deep-keeled boat can never reach in the first place. A boat that lives at anchor instead of paying for a slip never pays that marina surcharge at all. The width that scares off dockside owners is completely irrelevant to the owner who never plans on paying for a dock in the first place. The second reason people walk past is simpler. Decades of sailing culture trained monohull sailors to see catamarans as charter fleet toys, stable enough to prevent seasickness, but graceless, built for a week of vacation rather than a real voyage. That reputation kept demand for older cruising catamarans artificially low for years, even as the boats themselves kept quietly crossing oceans. And low demand on a genuinely capable boat is exactly what creates a bargain. The math backs this up directly. Because a catamaran's living space sits on a wide bridge deck between two full hulls instead of squeezed into one narrow center hull, a cruising catamaran routinely offers more permanent berths, more sitting headroom, and a galley that never heels compared to a monohull of similar overall length. You are paying catamaran prices for monohull crushing square footage, and the stigma is the only reason the price hasn't caught up to that reality yet. Run the actual Liveaboard math and the gap gets even wider. A Caribbean marina slip for a multi-hull can run $1,200 to $2,400 a month, and that same boat anchored out costs nothing beyond the fuel to run a dinghy ashore. Bahamas marinas charge roughly $15 to $30 a foot, depending on the island, and Mediterranean marinas can exceed €2,000 a month with summer surcharges on top. Liveaboards who buy one of these overlooked catamarans specifically because it can anchor in 3 feet of water and then actually anchor instead of chasing a marina berth are not just avoiding the stigma, they are avoiding the single largest recurring cost of living on the water at all. There's a structural advantage underneath all of this too that rarely gets mentioned. Most cruising catamarans run twin engines in separate hulls, so a failure in one still leaves you with power and steerage to reach port, a redundancy a single-engine monohull simply does not have. Combine that with a hull form that cannot heal more than a few degrees, even in a hard gust. And you get a boat that is measurably safer to live aboard day to day, not just cheaper to buy, which is the part the stigma never gives these designs credit for. Add in the shallow draft, and you also get access to entire cruising grounds that a 6-foot keel monohull can only look at from a distance, the Bahamas' skinny banks and protected creeks along the intracoastal waterway among them. If you're still with me, hit subscribe, because the 4 specific boats worth actually stopping for are exactly the ones everyone keeps sailing past. The first is the Gemini 105MC, designed by British expatriate Tony Smith, who founded performance cruising in Maryland in 1980 with his wife Susan after studying engineering at the University of East Anglia and racing single-handed, including a 4th-place finish in the first ever Round Britain race. The design evolved from the original Gemini 3400 in 1993, the first catamaran with a lifting underhung rudder system, into the 105M in 1995, then the 105MC in 2004, the C standing for convertible, a reference to the extended cockpit enclosure and taller mast added in that update. Over 1,200 hulls have been built, making it one of the best-selling catamarans ever produced in the United States. And production moved to Florida in 2009 after the financial crisis hit the original Maryland operation. Unlike most cruising catamarans, the Gemini runs on a single engine rather than twin diesels, typically a 27 horsepower unit, trading the redundancy of dual power plants for a lighter, simpler, and considerably cheaper boat to maintain. The Gemini draws as little as 1.5 feet with its centerboards up, extending to about 5 feet for windward performance, giving access to anchorages a fixed keel boat simply cannot enter. Smith and his son sailed one across the North Atlantic in 23 days through 45-knot winds and 35-foot waves, and another owner sailed one across the entire Pacific to Fiji. Used examples regularly sell in the $65,000 to $140,000 range, depending on year and condition, a fraction of the roughly $220,000 a new one commanded before production shifted, and remarkably affordable for a boat with a genuine ocean crossing record behind it. The second is the PDQ 32 and 36, built in Whitby, Ontario, by a Canadian company founded in 1987 by a small group of dedicated multi-hull enthusiasts, including Harvey Griggs, an MIT-trained engineer, and designer Alan Slater, who had already spent 20 years designing one-off catamarans before PDQ came together, all of them determined to build what they called a modern, commodious performance catamaran of impeccable quality. The name itself stood for Pretty Damn Quick, a nod to that performance-first philosophy, and the company's first prototype was literally built as a plug for the production molds inside the old Whitby Boatworks facility, the same yard that had built classic Alberg-designed monohulls for decades before catamarans ever entered the picture. The 36, designed by Slater, launched in 1991, evolving from an original 34-foot prototype and stayed in production until 2003, with roughly 100 hulls built. The smaller 32 followed in 1994 as a lighter, less expensive alternative, with 53 built over the next 8 years. Both draw under 3 feet, cruise comfortably at 7 to 8 knots, and were built with vacuum-bagged foam coring, acrylic-modified epoxy resin, and even carbon fiber in the main beam, genuine engineering rigor for a boat this size that most builders in this price range never bothered with. Separately, PDQ also built a diesel-powered catamaran trawler, sold under the same numbering system starting as the Power Cat 32 and later stretched into a 34, a completely different design from the sailing 32 and 36, running twin 75 horsepower Yanmar diesels at 13 to 14 knots on roughly 4 gallons an hour, for anyone who wants the same shallow draft, wide open living space formula without a rig to manage. A PDQ 32 today typically sells for $85,000 to $110,000, almost exactly what it cost 15 to 20 years ago, which tells you these boats simply are not depreciating the way most production sailboats do. The third is the Lagoon 380, designed by the French firm VPLP and first built in 1999 by Jeannot's Construction Naval Bordeaux, with more than 900 hulls launched, making it the best-selling cruising catamaran of all time. An update after hull number 300 brought 17 documented improvements, including larger hull windows and a redesigned owner's cabin, and the updated version became known as the 380 S2. This is the boat that best explains the charter fleet economics behind cheap catamarans. Charter companies bought them by the hundreds, ran them hard in the Caribbean and the Mediterranean for 5 to 8 years under professional maintenance contracts, then sold them off in bulk once the charter fleet cycled to newer tonnage. Ex-charter Lagoon 380s typically sell for 15 to 25% less than a comparable privately owned example, and the model as a whole depreciates only about 34% after nearly a decade, a remarkably shallow curve for a production sailboat, and industry appraisals put Lagoon's broader lineup at retaining roughly 60 to 65% of value after 5 years, right alongside Leopard and Fountaine Pajot as the 3 brands that hold value best in this category. That combination, huge original production numbers plus routine charter fleet churn plus genuinely strong resale retention, is exactly why 380s show up constantly on the used market at prices that undercut nearly everything else in its size range. The fourth is the Prout Snowgoose, built by a British company with roots going back to 1935, when brothers Roland and Francis Prout started out building canoes and folding dinghies before inventing the world's first production catamaran, the Shearwater 3, in 1956, a boat so quick it beat every top racing dinghy helmsman of the era across the English Channel by over an hour. More than 2,000 Shearwaters were built, some sold as kits for home builders, and that same design philosophy, simple, seaworthy, affordable, carried directly into the Snowgoose. The Snowgoose itself launched in 1971, initially built under license by Thames Marine, and by the time Prout went out of business in 2002, more than 500 had been built, with hundreds of documented ocean crossings between them, following in the wake of Prout's own earlier catamaran, sailed by Dr. David Lewis, which became the first catamaran ever to circumnavigate the globe after competing in the 1964 single-handed transatlantic race. Cruising World magazine ranked the Snowgoose the second best cruising boat of all time, of any hull configuration. Its distinctive mast-aft rig keeps the mainsail small and the headsail large, a setup deliberately chosen so one person could handle the boat alone. And because Prout kept the Snowgoose's beam closer to traditional monohull proportions, it fits into standard Marina berths that turn away wider modern cats entirely, sidestepping the exact surcharge problem newer catamarans run into. Older Snowgoose 37s routinely sell for under $40,000 today, cheap enough that a $100,000 total budget can realistically cover both the boat and an actual circumnavigation. Before you buy any of these 4, remember the boat is only half the equation. Condition is the other half. Ask specifically about the centerboard and rudder bearings on a Gemini, since those are the parts that see the most wear from decades of raising and lowering in sand and mud. On any PDQ, check the foam core around deck hardware for soft spots from old leaks, since foam core decks are lighter and stronger when dry, but can hide rot for years once water finds a way in through a bedded fitting. On a Lagoon, coming out of charter service, pull the full maintenance log from the charter company directly rather than trusting a verbal summary from a broker, since a professionally maintained ex-charter boat is a genuine bargain, but a neglected one is not, and the difference is invisible without the paperwork. And on any Snowgoose, given that the design is now more than 50 years old, get a moisture meter across the entire hull and deck before you sign anything. and have a rigger inspect the mast, aft standing rigging specifically, since replacement parts for a design this old are not sitting on a shelf at the local chandlery. None of these 4 boats are the newest, the fastest, or the most Instagram famous catamarans on the water. That is precisely why they're still affordable, and precisely why brokers keep watching buyers walk right past them towards something shinier and twice the price. The cheapest way left to actually live on the water was sitting quietly at the end of the dock the entire time, drawing 3 feet of water, costing nothing to anchor, and waiting for someone to finally stop walking past it.